Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. If you're listening on Friday, TGIF, baby. I hope you got great plans, fun plans, relaxing plans for the weekend. I'm planning on taking a few days off the beginning of next week, but I will still have episodes dropping each day with great guests from Dr. Michael Mann to Tim Wise and more. So look for those. Kenneth C. Davis is going to give us a history lesson on Independence Day and more. But today, I've got a wonderful conversation with Christian Finnegan. Like, we really got to some good stuff today. I think you're going to really get a lot out of this one. Ophira Eisenberg couldn't join us as she normally does. It's our trio on Fridays, but she was traveling to a gig, so we made fun of her and had our own conversation, and I think you're going to love that. And also, Dr. Peter Hotez joins me today from the Aspen Ideas Fest, where I used to go every year. Well, he's out there as an invited speaker, of course, and we caught up on everything dealing with COVID and politics and media and polio and anti-vax and so much more. A great conversation with a real American hero, Peter Hotez, and comedian Christian Finnegan. That's what I've got for you today. Thanks for hanging out with me last night. I don't know how it went because I'm doing this before the hangout, so I don't have to when I'm a little intoxicated after the hangout, but lots I'm sure we covered and hopefully had some fun as we always do. So glad that you are supporting and enjoying this podcast as much as I am doing it. Always let me know what you think I can do better and more creatively. I love hearing from you. So email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com anytime. Let's get to it, shall we? Huh? All right. You know him from this show. You know him from his stand-up comedy. You know him from New Music for Olds, which is his newsletter now about music, which I absolutely love. I hope you'll subscribe to that and even pay for a subscription. And, of course, follow him on Twitter @ChristFinnegan to learn where he's performing and get the laughs and always his thoughtful opinions. Super thoughtful conversation today with Christian. Very excited for you to hear my conversation with Peter Hotez coming up. But let's do it right now with Christian Finnegan. Okay, there he is, Christian Finnegan. We're always happy to have him. What happened to Ophira? She's left us again. I don't know.
Yeah, I think she's clearly trying to send a message that she doesn't need us. And the message has been received, Ophira. We get what you're trying to put across, and your whole "I'm going to Canada" nonsense is not going to stand. That's where she is, I believe, right?
Yeah, her whole "I'm on an airplane when you guys want to tape" thing.
Yeah. And this whole thing about being Canadian in general, I've never really fully bought. It's always felt like a dodge to me. I don't know if people know this. Ophira Eisenberg is from Tampa.
I was gonna say I always thought she was from Central Jersey when I first met her, but and when she told me she was Canadian, you're starting to peel back the onion, and I think we should confront her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about time that somebody called her on her bullshit.
We found these photos from the class of '92 at the Tampa High. This lady sure looks like a young Ophira Eisenberg.
You just draped in the American flag. Her having a Reagan Bush 88. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. That's a movie 84. Anyway, I'm not very funny today.
Hey,
it's not a funny day, is it?
Well, no, because you were saying just before we hit record here, you're talking about, can we just get a piece of unexpected good news? And I'm not sure if that's your prism, but I think I might share it. It's the things that could go wrong, like Supreme Court decisions that came down, keep going wrong. I mean, we can talk about the January 6th committee, and I want to with you, but go ahead and tell me your feeling on the news cycle.
Well, it just, maybe this is just perception, but it just feels like we have not had a lucky bounce in a very long time.
Yeah.
The culture. When I say we, of course, I'm talking about left-leaning people. People in general have had just bad break after bad break the past few years, between COVID and the economy and all these things. But specifically, if you are inclined to want equality and social progress and a non-insane way of life, it just feels like forever since things went in a positive direction. There hasn't been unexpected good news in a long time. That's why we cherish those Twitter accounts, that show us, two baby goats meeting after being separated for a few months, or, you know what I mean? Like those little things of like, this guy helped a woman cross the street, and we retweet them and we cherish them because we're just so starved for signs of positivity or, a point. I don't mean to get super existential here, but it's been really hard to feel like any sense of faith that things are headed in a positive direction. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to sort of there is that sort of keep calm and carry on thing, that sort of the stoicism that maybe helps us get through this. But at a certain point, how long can you maintain that stance? At a certain point, there has to be some indication that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And it's increasingly hard to feel that way.
Yeah, I'm so glad that and I think this is one of the great things about talking with you about such things, is you're really great at framing it and articulating it, how you see it. And I think a lot of people listening see it similarly. I certainly do, which is one of the reasons I like talking with you about it. But I think the answer to that is when you say how long or how much more, it's like, oh no, I broke like 10 times last week over this. And what does that mean? How do you rebuild? How do you regroup? How do you refocus? I mean, for me, one thing that was kind of public is I cut the news segment. Too much of my life is too emotional about the news and other things in my life. I couldn't do that. I couldn't continue. I broke. So people, I think, break, and whether they rebuild, they build back better.
But I mean, how many times can you break? I mean, what you're calling a break, I mean, I understand why you're using that verbiage, but you made a tactical decision to focus your project in a different direction. I mean, I think as you discussed, I remember when you had the thread about why you were getting rid of the news segment, you talked about how much time it took you, and maybe it wasn't equivalent to the value added to the podcast. That maybe for as much time and emotional energy as you're spending on it, maybe people didn't even really need it or like it as much. That the stuff that was easier is the stuff that people responded to more. So why not steer in that direction?
Right. All that was true, but I also was selling the depressive shit that we're talking about, that you were talking about when you just talked about the news doesn't seem to go right, the ball doesn't seem to bounce. Like, I was handing that out, which wasn't making my life better, and it wasn't making anybody else's life better. And no one really made the argument to me, by the way, that it did. And many people had stopped listening to that part of the show, or even at all, because it's like, I can't start my day with this. And number two, people say, I like not having to know every single thing that happened in the world and in the country. So you just really have to step out of it as much as you can and focus on maybe one thing, one problem, one thing that you want to try to fix. And maybe that gives you purpose.
How much more drilling down can you do? It's like, how much more tactical redeployment of your emotional energies can you do before, I mean, what are you left with? I mean, that's why I've completely, invested all of my emotional energy into the NBA draft, which takes place tonight, which means nothing to my life or anyone's. And I will feel a burning sense of disappointment because things will never go right if you are a Knicks fan in this capacity. But at least it'll feel like a safe way to feel depressed because it means nothing. Do you know what I mean? That it's like
a safe way to be let down, to be disappointed because it means nothing, except for the guy who didn't get drafted. It's going to be a hard day for those guys who they make films about.
Yes, that is true. But
documentaries.
I believe he plays for Fashion Institute of Technology. The player will not be drafted. I don't know. Whenever somebody asks me to make March Madness picks, because I don't really follow college basketball, I always pick Fashion Institute of Technology to take it all.
That's great. It's funny that you say that too, because my best friend in college, my roommate, he was the star of the basketball team, and he transferred from there to play at FIT, and he dominated at FIT as an actual player on the actual team.
I think that's a different FIT. That's probably Florida International.
Nope, it is the one in the city. They have a team. He played on it. He was
they don't.
Yes,
No, they don't.
They did.
Really?
I went to a game, so they definitely did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That completely.
You should see their uniforms.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how long those long trains can get in the way when you're.
The reason why nobody knows about them is they don't play well because they're forced to wear a cape, and it makes the game completely different for everybody.
Absolutely, yep. You got just the giant Grace Jones hats they all have to wear.
Speaking of, I wanted to say this on the podcast
because it's hard for them to know they're even on the same team because they can't wear the same thing. Like just as a rule.
Exactly.
You would never wear that person's wearing what I'm wearing. I would never wear that. So
they don't know. They don't know. Plus the masks. So I wanted to say this at some point and share it somehow, and no better time than this. There's a Little League park right behind my house through the woods. And every weekend you can hear the games. And I don't mind it. It's not terrible. I wish I had complete silence, and I will at some point. I kind of want to live that way.
I mean, we'll all have complete silence at some point.
Thank you for that. And here's the thing. When a huge play happens or when the game is over, the kind of screams that you hear from these prepubescent, I guess they're mostly boys, and their families, their parents, this mix of elation and exuberance, it's so, to me, over the top, not knowing what's happening, but also just knowing it's Little League, but it's so jubilant. And part of me hears it and goes, oh, they're so happy, and I feel their joy. But I immediately know that there's an opposite feeling happening to that, and I'm in my backyard, and I feel the sadness of the immature boys who lost, and I wonder if that stays with them. And I usually spend a few minutes thinking about that. Is that weird? And what do you think about that? And is that a normal thing that people feel the one team's joy and the other team's pain?
Oh, sure. I think it's totally natural. I mean, I played sports when I was a kid because that's just what people did, but I was never like a sports kid. I was not emotionally designed to be a good athlete, much less physically. But do you have memories of failures and triumphs from childhood sports? I mean, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really a sports kid, but I do.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. But they were mainly... Yeah, I mean,
clearly it sticks with you.
Mine were mainly that I didn't get in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like that I missed the goal or lost
all the different Bazooka Joe cartoons that you read while sitting on the bench.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that did happen on that bench. I will say that. A lot of guys came out to me on that bench. Anyway,
I think that I'm not probably the first or millionth person to make this observation, but I think that one of the reasons we play sports and we get engaged in sports is that it is a safe space, ironically, to have those feelings of triumph and defeat and excitement and joy. It's an arena in the non-sports meaning of the word to experience emotions, in a way that is essentially meaningless. I mean that's probably a very sociology 101 way to look at sports, but
I mean, I don't think it's meaningless because it probably creates confidence and it creates stature, and it also decreases stature and deteriorates confidence and creates insecurity. I mean, isn't it the most?
But I think that we all have emotions that we don't have a place for, and I think sports creates a place for them. Do you know what I mean? That it's like you have these existential feelings of sadness or frustration or anger towards things that you have no control over, that you might not even be able to identify, whether it's your family situations or your class struggle, poverty or whatever. And sports keeps it simple. I have a dumb definition of I'm not high. I promise you I'm not high. But I have sort of a little definition of what art is. And to me, art is the practice of identifying or creating glimpses of order in a disordered universe, if that makes sense. And I feel like sports kind of does the same thing, that sports creates a sort of ordered framework to experience your emotions and sort of have everything make sense, where there's a winner, there's a loser, you know what I mean? Because life isn't like that. Life is inherently disordered and chaotic. And so you don't fully ever experience those feelings. And sports creates a way that makes them small enough that they can fit into your human brain. Somebody wins, somebody loses. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I really am fascinated by everything that you're saying. And art creates, your definition of art is that it creates these moments of...
Creates or identifies, like moments of order, or imagines, like either identifies or imagines moments of order.
A TV episode, a play, a stand-up set.
That we have these feelings that are just too amorphous and too difficult. Life is just inherently chaotic, and that is crazy making. And so art, even if it's about something sad, it creates, in my opinion, often an illusion of order to things, that things happen for a reason. Because in a movie or in a play or even in a piece of music or whatever, there's a 3-act structure. This happens, and then later the result of that happening creates this. Does that make sense?
I get it a lot. I like it a lot. Life is inherently chaotic, and when you wake up in the morning, you can script out your day all you want. That is not the way it's going to go, no matter what. It might go close to that. If you're alone,
very rarely.
If you're alone on a meditation retreat, you might get close, but you might also not, because you might have some breakthrough. I'm trying to think of something, some anodyne day where there's no variables that you can't really control, from what you eat to who you talk to. But the truth is, there isn't. That situation never happens, because you could be meditating and have a thought that, destroys you. Or whatever. I mean, I can't, You're absolutely right. Life is inherently chaotic, and you try to control it, but you can't. But you can in a 3-act play or a song or a comedy set.
We want to imagine that life has a sense of order to it. Our brains scream out for that. Give us a reason why X is happening, And so art is sort of a way to imagine why that might be happening. If you do a story, I'm trying to think of just sort of a classic movie, and Michael Corleone, his father, they try to kill his dad, and so Michael Corleone decides to set out and take over the 5 families and take over the New York Mafia. And at the end of The Godfather, in the last 10 minutes of The Godfather, it turns out Michael Corleone got hit by a bus while crossing the street. Well, that would be not a satisfying, dramatic thing. Do you know what I mean? But that is more like life. That's why life isn't art. That art is something different. Art says A plus B equals C. You know what I mean? Whereas life says A plus B equals bicycle. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, it's more like an Adam Sandler film. Yeah. By the way, you follow this character for an hour and then he gets hit by a bus. But you're making so much sense, and it really is. It's helpful. What you just said really helped me, I know, and I'm sure other people will hear it. And that's what I love about talking to you and being your friend.
But just, today specifically with this Supreme Court conversation, decisions, and also with abortion probably landing tomorrow, it's really hard to see a path right now, to see a point.
You got pandemic, you got gas prices, you got a war in Russia that doesn't seem to be abating now for years, and the Russians seem to be winning. Of course, you've got the climate crisis. I've been thinking and reading a lot about that lately. I'm going to talk to Dr. Michael Mann. There's just, it's summer, and whatever that means, I don't know. Maybe. And then, of course, everybody has their own familial, what's going on with your marriage, your kids, their health, your job. It's a lot. So,
I mean, in a way, it's really, and we may have even said this in the past, so I apologize if I'm being redundant. It's very efficient for life to kind of fall apart and have that dovetail so nicely with sort of my general midlife crisis that way I can tackle it all at once. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, thank God this wasn't happening when I was in my 20s, when things were, when I ostensibly was out trying to get laid and stuff like that. That would have just spread all the misery way too thin. It's nice to sort of be able to tackle it all in a nice 5-year period.
I like that, and I can relate to a certain extent. So, yeah. I mean, we were joking at our stand-up show the other day, making fun of, I was kind of being misery funny, kind of complaining, and you guys went up and talked about my crisis at midlife, and it was hilarious. And it's so true. I mean, it's true of everybody. It's certainly true of men. It's definitely true of women with menopause and perimenopause and just everything about aging and all of the other stuff. That's why it's like, I totally understand why a lot of people's impulse is just be like, oh my God, stop bitching, stop complaining. Like, let's just watch Real Housewives, or let's give too much of a shit about the NBA draft or whatever, like to find some sort of silly oasis to, rather than just sort of, sit around and feel depressed. I totally understand that. And we all have our escapes. But yeah, there's certain days when the void feels especially voidy. One thing I thought that I could talk with you about, very well said, by the way, just want to put a bow on that and shift to something different to some extent. I wondered if we could just have a little bit of fun, riffing about this time of year is graduation. And I don't know if you've got material or thoughts about it, but I said this already on the podcast. It's probably not worth even mentioning again. I certainly want to get your take. I tweeted that I didn't want to go to my daughter's 8th grade.
Oh, I saw that. The insanity.
Did you see the reply?
Yes.
Yeah. Somebody famous, like Patricia Arquette, commented on it. I think she's huge on Twitter, and she made a negative comment. And I think, however, I still don't know how replies work, but she doesn't even follow me. So it was super weird. But as a result of her comment, normally a tweet like that would just be the people who generally follow me. But there was a whole bunch of people who certainly don't know who I am or whatever. And they said I was a horrible father and all this stuff. But it like the graduation itself was as bad as it was way worse than I thought it was going to be. Way worse. It was fucking freezing. And that's mid-June day. And they read 600 names and you couldn't even hear the speeches, and people were talking and people cheer for their kid. It's like it's just brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal. Yeah. It wasn't fun. Of course I was going to go. It's my daughter, but 8th grade graduation. Anyway, your thoughts on these commencements, graduations? Did you have good times, bad times, enjoyable?
I spoke at my graduation.
Oh, look, which one?
My high school graduation.
Why were you chosen to speak?
Well, I went to a very small school.
Yeah.
My junior and senior year of high school, I went to a performing arts school that had 165 people in it. And the kid who was class president, which was even more nominal than that title is in normal schools. Like, nobody gave a crap about school government where I went. He didn't want to do it, and he just didn't want to. And so they asked around who wanted to do it, and I was full of, in my mind, deep thoughts. And so they let me do it. And, how
was it?
I still look back at that speech. I think I have it somewhere. And I think it's pretty good, for a high school. I mean, I did fall back on that incredibly lame trope of, not exactly these words, but, Webster's defines, that sort of trope,
okay.
Education is, or, relying on quotes and things like that,
Yeah.
Winston Churchill once said, I mean, I didn't quote Winston Churchill, but I did end it with a David Bowie quote. So I felt still happy about that.
Can you recall the quote?
Sure. Just let all the children boogie.
Just let all the children.
Let all the children boogie. It's from the song Starman.
What does that mean to you, or what did that mean in the moment?
Well, basically, like let them do their thing. Let them get out of here. The one thing that I felt was a pretty astute observation for an 18-year-old which was to say, you know, you're going to graduate. You're already here in the dumb church that we were graduating. Like, you're already here. There's nothing you could do right now that's going to stop you from graduating. You know, and then I had a joke of like, let's all close our eyes and imagine what we could do right now that would stop us from graduating. But I said, you know, so you're going to be walking out of this church, but there's no need to run. Like, just walk and enjoy it and sort of acknowledge that you're having this moment right now. And, you know, which is something I think it's important to do when you're having sort of a pivotal moment in your life, is to just sort of step outside of yourself and say like, oh yeah, this is this moment that people have told me is important, and I should at least be aware that I'm having it, and not be so completely focused on what's coming next that I don't get to marinate in this a bit.
I love it. I absolutely love that. That's great. And a great a great positive thing to think about. And it's kind of about mindfulness in general. You can apply that probably to the most mundane moments. But by the way, I feel like whenever I'm in a church, I feel like I should run out of it because it's a church. But
yes,
that could have been anywhere. That's awesome. I love that. I love that you spoke and said that, and that it's still smart. I gave the commencement speech at my junior college that I graduated from in 2014 or 15. My mom also went there.
Wow.
My parents were there. Val was there. The girls were there, and it wasn't great. It really wasn't. Like,
it was so funny. You were leading the way you were addressing it, like, and it was so fun and enriching. What was not great about it?
Just, I rewrote it a billion times, and I had this theme, this idea, the couple of jokes, and it nothing hit, and I didn't know what to do with it. It was so much different than any kind of other audience I'd ever been in front of, and they weren't ready for any jokes, and they weren't the smartest group anyway. It wasn't, the top college. Of course, it was like a junior college, and I was like, oh my gosh, and it just. I think the message was good, more importantly, just me being there. I was like, you can go to the school and have success in life, I think, but I don't know that my speech proved it.
You too can have a jerk shed.
That was pre-jerk shed. I mean, hopefully I get invited back. And now, you know what I did? Now I live in the jerk shed. Christian Finnegan, you are awesome. This was great.
I maybe got a little too hippy dippy there, and so I apologize.
Nope. I like getting hippy dippy with you, not with everybody, but definitely with you.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, man. All right, there he goes, Christian Finnegan. Wasn't that a good one? Did I promise you? I told you it was going to be a good one, and it really was. So great. I love talking to him. I love the way that he frames things and helps us understand the struggles that we're dealing with, the metaphors, the jokes, and it's the thoughtfulness. It's so great. Go let him know if you appreciated that. Go subscribe to his newsletter, New Music for Olds, and on Twitter at Christ Finnegan. And if you get the chance, see him live for sure. We'll be doing dates again soon, as a matter of fact. All right, now to my second guest of the show. He is one of the most well-known physicians and communicators now of science, specifically vaccine science and molecular virology. He's a professor of pediatrics. He is the chair in topical pediatrics at Texas Children's Hospital, a professor at Baylor University, and the author of several important books. PeterHotez.org is his website, by the way. And he is one of the most sought-after speakers and doctors these days. Actually, at Aspen Ideas Festival, when I touched base with him the other day, and I couldn't be more happy that I did. He is one of my favorite people to talk to, and he's always very generous to me. And I hope you let him know that you heard him here. That means so much. He made time for me, and I think you're going to really learn and like our conversation. Always great, always thoughtful. Dr. Peter Hotez, a guy who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Prize, rather, I think, probably in science and research of some sort. Anyway, he talks a little bit about that and about his mom who just passed, about getting COVID himself, and so much more. Here we go. Dr. Peter Hotez from Aspen Ideas Fest right now. Go. I would love to. We can talk a little bit about that if you want, but okay. Can you do like 15 minutes, 20 minutes? Is that possible?
Perfect. Whatever you need. I'm good.
Awesome. All right. Here I go then. I'm recording. Okay. There he is, Dr. Peter Hotez. He is apparently been taken hostage at the Aspen Ideas Fest, according to his video. Are you okay? Do you want to give up the international help sign?
Yeah, no, I know it looks a bit like a hostage video, but I'm doing fine. It's in the hotel room. Fortunately, they made up the bed and it's looking presentable. And but I'm here at the Aspen Ideas Festival for Health, Aspen Ideas Health, and it's just some amazing people here, real thought leaders in the health of the nation and global health. So it's an honor to be here. I'll be interviewing tomorrow with Helen Branswell and my science partner for the COVID vaccine, Mary Elena Patazzi, and then doing some book signings. So it'll be a fun week.
Yeah, for sure. You are a great guest for Aspen to have there. But I wonder if a guy like you is educated and smart and passionate as you will learn something himself. Or I mean, you're part of the health track, so it's a lot of different health experts, physicians, scientists, and so on. And then I think the next week they go into a broader range of issues. But anything that you're curious about while you're there?
Well, we're in we're in a time of transition, right? We're looking for some new leadership in health, a new NIH director, looking at how we're going to continue managing the COVID pandemic, what's next with pandemic preparedness. I think there's a whole host of issues. And one of the things that I'll be speaking about in addition to our vaccine is the fact that the anti-vaccine movement is gaining every day in strength and political clout. And I'm quite worried about this affecting vaccine uptake that goes beyond COVID-19 vaccines. I think now that they're politically empowered, well-funded, well-organized, it's not like if and when COVID-19 subsides, it's not like they're going to fold the tent and say, okay, we're done now. They're going to go after other vaccines, both in the U.S. and globally. Our Texas GOP just announced in their platform that all Texans have a natural and inalienable right to refuse vaccination. So, you know where that's going. So this is not getting better. It's getting worse.
Yes. You just in case anybody didn't hear exactly the first word you said, the anti-vaccine movement is getting stronger. You have been trying to debunk them ever since your book about your daughter, which I think is titled "Vaccines Didn't Cause Rachel's Autism." Is that the title of it?
That's right, about my daughter with autism and intellectual disabilities. That was the first assertion. They claimed that vaccines cause autism, and we know that's not the case. So I went into the evidence for that, and also what autism is, how it begins in early fetal brain development, the genes involved with it, but now it's shifted, it's pivoted, it's become more a political movement around this fake concept of health freedom, medical freedom. You can't tell us what to do. And it's all coming out of the far right. They're saying, it's language like, well, first they're going to vaccinate you and then they're going to take away your guns and your Bibles. And as ridiculous as that sounds to us, there's a quarter of the country who believes it, most of it in the red states here in the South and in Texas.
So, yeah, you mentioned you tweeted this out as well. Your point is you don't think they're going to stop at the COVID vaccine. You think they're coming after all of the rest of the vaccines that we've had for generations that have saved millions upon millions of lives. And then the headline at the Drudge Report, which I confess I check most of the day, is polio in London, UK emergency. And so if the anti-vaccine movement grows, we're going to have these diseases that we defeated so heroically come back, and we're apparently already seeing it.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing now is what the anti-vaccine in the U.S. is doing is they want to globalize. Not only do they want to make all vaccines optional, even for school entry in the United States, and force declines in vaccination rates in the U.S. among kids in school and bring back measles in the United States. But now they're exporting this globally. We saw this with the Health Freedom Convoy movement in Canada and Western Europe. And I'm worried about low and middle income countries. There's some evidence to suggest that this is not permeating the African continent, that US style anti-vaccine movement. And I'm actually working on an article about that now. And I'm quite concerned that one of the consequences that we can erase or reverse some of the amazing achievements that we've had over the last 2 decades with the Millennium Development Goals, the Gavi Alliance for immunization and vaccinating the world's children. I'm worried that's now going to start to erode as a consequence of this.
Yeah, you didn't. Well, we can always say this, but as a vaccine scientist, someone who is literally creating miracle vaccines, I guess you never really thought you'd have to be up against psychology. I mean, you always knew there was hesitance, but the kind of movement that you're seeing now, it's cult psychology. And
yeah, I mean, when I got my MD and PhD in New York in the 80s, I'm dating myself, I said, look, one of the reasons I wanted to develop vaccines is I considered that a heroic thing to do, to make vaccines to save lives, new vaccines for diseases that we didn't have vaccines for. And I dedicated my life to that. I think the part I never would have predicted was that vaccines and vaccine scientists would be demonized like they are right now. And, you may not feel it as acutely up in New York like we do in the southern United States, but it's very aggressive down here. And they've got money, they've got clout, and the scary part now is they have political backing at the highest levels of things like the House Freedom Caucus in the U.S. Congress. We've got federal judges now against vaccines. You've got governors of some of the red states against vaccines. And of course, it's amplified every night on Fox News with the Fox News anchors. That has a lot of reach. And then they go after me. And when they get tired of beating up on Tony Fauci, I'm sort of Tony Fauci light. They sort of go beat up on me and it's very intimidating and scary at times.
Yeah, again, not something you thought you'd have to put up with, but we are so grateful that you've stuck to the fight. Someone suggested to you that you should consider leaving Texas. You've been talking about the GOP convention, their platform there. What's wrong with that suggestion? Why not leave this godforsaken state that just announced that apparently they want to secede?
Well, I said what I said to my medical students and my graduate students and my residents and fellows. And, some of them, sometimes they look at me like Moses in the desert saying, why did you bring us here? And to that I say, look, you can go to San Francisco or Boston or Philadelphia and everybody agree with you, or you can stay here and be a force for change and to fight the good fight. And I think there's some merit to that. And people understand that, and people do, especially young people. They want to make a difference, and I think this is an opportunity. You can really do a lot of good here in Texas.
Peter, you must not have done a very good job making your vaccine or whatever vaccine that you took yourself, because apparently you just got COVID, and I can't imagine what the tweets and the comments about you contracting COVID were like. It must not have worked, huh?
Well, the point is the whole time I had COVID, I was doing Zoom calls, and I even did an interview with Don Lemon on CNN, coughing a bit, but getting through the interview fine. I don't necessarily recommend it, but the point is I was doing this. I was pretty much didn't have to change my schedule at all because I was fully vaccinated and boosted, as opposed to if I wasn't vaccinated. And I think there's a good possibility I would have been in a hospital bed or worse, an ICU bed, given my age. So I think that was a teachable moment to say that the vaccines, even if you do get breakthrough COVID, which is happening now with these new BA2 and BA4, BA5 subvariants, you're still not going to get very sick if you're not only vaccinated, but vaccinated and boosted. And I think that's a message there to get boosted as well. And unfortunately, too few Americans are accepting their boosters. Only about 30% are accepting their boosters. And I got my second booster, and I don't even know the number of Americans who are getting their second booster. I'm pretty sure it's quite small. But I do think that's a concern for the nation. We do need a broader vaccine strategy, because it's clear Americans are not going to continue to accept mRNA boosters. We're going to have to come up with something else. And I've been pushing the White House to start thinking about some alternative strategies.
Well, that's good to hear. I just saw that you tweeted the latest statistics. The world has administered its 12 billionth COVID vaccine shot, yet 73% of the global population remains unboosted and 33% completely unvaccinated. And then Philip Shelkins, who you shared this, he goes on a thread about where it is. But what do you want to say about the state of vaccination in the world, including the vaccination that you and your partner Helen are behind?
Well, we're still doing a crummy job vaccinating the world, and we're still not getting vaccines out to the people who need them. And and convincing them of the need for vaccines. And, there's a lot of complexity with mRNA technology in terms of the freezer chain requirement. That's why we developed a low-cost vaccine for global health, which has now gone into about almost 40 million kids, 12 to 14 in India, and another 20 million have gotten their second dose. So 60 million doses have gone out, is the least expensive vaccine out there. And we think that's going to be part of the answer, because it's a more familiar technology to parents, similar technology used to make the recombinant hepatitis B vaccine that parents have been using for their kids for decades. And now there's a new version that the Indonesians are developing from our vaccine technology. So that's exciting. And because it's a vegan technology, they're even looking at this as a halal vaccine for Muslim majority countries, which is quite exciting. So we're working on that as well.
What about this development or the announcement that children under 5 here in the United States can now be vaccinated? What do you want to say about that threshold being met and where it means we are at now? What does that mean?
Well, I think it's really important we vaccinate our toddlers. The disease burden estimates say we've lost around 200 toddlers in this pandemic, maybe more than that. 20,000 have been hospitalized. So this is a serious disease in among toddlers. In fact, I was just on MSNBC talking with Katie Tour about this and the need to vaccinate our toddlers. Unfortunately, the numbers are not going to move quickly on this. And I say that because only about 30% of children age 5 to 11 have gotten vaccinated so far. And if you look at here in the southern United States, only 11% of 5 to 11-year-olds. So we're probably looking at single-digit percent numbers for the toddlers. So there's going to be a lot of education and advocacy that needs to happen before we start getting significant uptake. So I think it's going to be a slow process.
So when we think about the point at which we're at now and the point at where we have to go, I mean, how do you see it? I mean, you seem always the optimist, always the scholar, the researcher, but you more than anybody knows the media and political atmosphere we're up against. We've already talked about that. We're kind of losing the communication fight. When you say you're advising the Biden administration or even the public in terms of communicating science, is there anything that you really feel is lacking that we need to invest more resources, time, or thought into?
Yeah, we have to make your podcast, Pete, the most widely viewed and listened to podcast in America. And I think if that happens, that will help us go a long way towards this, because, you're really committed to getting timely and accurate information out there. And I'm very grateful for that. But there's not enough of you out there. So unfortunately, the anti-vaccine activism dominates the internet right now and dominates the podcast space. And so they're winning, or in this Pyrrhic sort of way. And so that's why parents are not vaccinating their kids. That's why too few people are taking their boosters and unnecessarily getting hospitalized as a consequence.
Yeah, we've got to do better at media in terms of covering this issue, which is one of the most important issues in the world, and not just when there is a pandemic that's meeting the headlines. I'm so glad that Aspen has you out there and that everybody still seems to be talking to Peter Hotez as much as possible, but it's never enough. You certainly are doing enough. Let me ask you here at the end, if you don't mind. I know your mom just passed away, and I wonder if you would just take a moment to tell us anything you want about Mom, because we, as I said, I think to you publicly, are so grateful to her for bringing us you and your heroic work. What do you want to say?
Well, she was an amazing lady. Had 4 kids, so I had 3 brothers and sisters, and met my dad when he came back from the war, and they got married, and so it's a real American story. Moved back to Hartford, Connecticut, where I was born and raised, and in West Hartford. And she was a stay-at-home mom. She loved her kids, and she would always gave me a lot of confidence when I was young. And I think, when I talk to new parents, I say maybe that's the single most important thing when kids are little, giving them lots of self-confidence. And she always said, you can do whatever you need. And later on, she would always tell me I was going to win the Nobel Prize, which I, did, like any Jewish mother, I didn't think much of that. But when right before she passed, I was nominated for the Nobel Prize, and I was able to tell her that. I think she thought I won the Nobel Prize, but I didn't want to burst her bubble at that point. And so she was a very kind, and she's a beautiful lady. She was voted most beautiful of Weaver High School in 1947. So, and she danced and sang on Arthur Gottfried's radio broadcast in Hartford. So she was destined for stardom, but met my dad and had me and brothers and sisters. And so there you are.
What was her name?
Jean Hotez.
Well, destined for stardom, but, you know, I'm sure your siblings are probably equally as impressive. But boy, to have Peter Hotez as your son nominated for the Nobel. I mean, is it true that she said, nominated or won, Peter? Not good enough. Not good enough. Keep trying.
If she were younger and more active, maybe we would have gone there. But
that's amazing. That's an amazing story. I'm so grateful that you shared her with us today and all of your wisdom with me anytime. You've been such a great friend and such an important resource for so many Americans and beyond, and obviously a hero creating this vaccine. And great to get an update and have a great time in Aspen. Enjoy yourself, and thank you so much, my friend.
And Pete, thanks again for everything you're doing. I can't tell you how important it is.
Thank you, Fal. Appreciate it. There he goes, Peter Hotez, but not before I said, thank you, Fal. The hell was that? I meant pal. And I said Fal. It was awful. I hope you didn't hear that. All right, that is so great. Dr. Peter Hotez, go thank him for joining me on Twitter. Go say, hi, Peter. I really loved hearing you on Pete Dominic on @StandUpWithPete. That's my Twitter handle. And check him out at Peter Hotez, of course. Say hi to Christian Finnegan as well. Thank him for joining us. Your tweets are the best way, one of the best ways to promote and market this show and our community that you could be a member of if you sign up now for as little as $5. Go to standupwithpete.com. Have an awesome weekend. Give a review to the podcast this weekend on Apple and Spotify. That's your assignment. That's your homework. And I hope to hear from you. standupwithpete@gmail.com. I hope wherever you are, you're doing okay. You're finding your peace. You're finding your joy. You're staying in the moment. If you're not meditating, revisit it. If you've never tried it, I say try it now. John Carroll, take us out while I go meditate myself. Bye-bye.
Keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. We got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience. package to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand